For over 1700 years, there was a truth about Mary Magdalene that the Church chose to bury forever in the depths of historical oblivion. A truth so powerful, so revolutionary, so absolutely transformative that it would completely change everything you thought you knew about early Christianity and its original transformative message, which reached all of humanity without institutional distortions. What you are about to hear today was considered a deadly heresy for centuries on end. Sacred documents were burned in ceremonial public bonfires. Testimonies were silenced through brutal physical torture and violent death. And one of the most important revolutionary and transformative figures of early Christianity was deliberately erased from the official history we know today without question. But we can no longer remain silent in complicit silence. Because in these times of massive global spiritual awakening, millennia-old lies begin to crumble like sandcastles before the mighty ocean of consciousness, and the truth demands to be revealed, no matter how much power those who have systematically hidden it for centuries with violent and manipulative methods wield. Mary Magdalene was not who you were told she was throughout your entire religious life, from childhood to adulthood. She was not the repentant sinner portrayed in the colorful stained glass windows of traditional Catholic churches for generations. She was not the redeemed prostitute featured in commercial Hollywood religious films designed for mass entertainment and mind control. She was something much deeper, much more sacred and much more dangerous to those who sought to control the faith and spirituality of millions of innocent people around the world for millennia. Mary Magdalene was the true spiritual leader of authentic early Christianity, untouched by later institutional manipulation. She was the absolute favorite disciple of the resurrected and glorified Jesus Christ. She was the one who received the most secret, profound, and powerful teachings of the enlightened Master directly from his lips without intermediaries. She was the one who truly understood the revolutionary message of the divine inner Christ, who lives in every human soul without exception. And for that very reason, she was the one who represented the greatest existential threat to an institutional church that was meticulously building its power on the total control, blind submission, and spiritual dependence of the ignorant masses who followed the established authorities without question. The conspiracy to silence Mary Magdalene wasn't accidental or spontaneous at all. It was systematic, calculated, relentless, and extremely effective, spanning consecutive centuries without interruption. Because she represented a direct, mystical, free Christianity, with no human intermediaries between the individual soul and the eternal, unchanging, universal divine. A Christianity where each person could be their own authorized priest, their own direct divine channel, their own spiritual teacher, completely independent of controlling external authorities. And that was absolutely intolerable, unacceptable to those who were building a religious empire based entirely on being the sole authorized intermediaries between Almighty God and humanity in need of spiritual salvation. Imagine for a moment what would have happened if the truth about Mary Magdalene had remained intact for these 2,000 years. If her image as a powerful spiritual leader had inspired millions of women to reclaim their natural divine power. If her mystical teachings had been preserved and taught in the churches. If Christianity had evolved as an egalitarian religion where both men and women could directly access the divine, the world would be completely different. Spirituality would be authentically personal and free. The religious control we have known for centuries would not exist, but that didn't suit those who wanted to build an empire of power and control. That's why Mary Magdalene had to disappear. Her voice had to be silenced. Her leadership had to be erased. Her spiritual power had to be completely negated. Today, for the first time in centuries, we are going to break this millennia-old silence imposed by religious authorities. We are going to reveal who Mary Magdalene really was and why her true story completely changed my spiritual life forever. Prepare yourself, because what you are about to hear will challenge everything you thought you knew about Christianity, about authentic spirituality, and about your own inner divine power waiting to be consciously awakened in this present moment as you listen to these revelatory words that will change your perspective forever. If you have ever felt deeply deceived, betrayed by the official religious institutions established for decades of your life, if you have ever felt that there is something fundamental that does not fit perfectly into the official story that you were told, since you were a small and innocent child. If your soul has ever desperately cried out from deep within that there was much more truth waiting to be discovered behind the repetitive, empty, and manipulative dogmas, this video is specifically for you and for your genuine spiritual awakening that is beginning right now, in this present moment, as you listen to these words that resonate in your heart. Because I know perfectly well that you are here for a divine reason that goes far beyond a simple, superficial, worldly coincidence. Your deepest spirit brought you to this exact moment because it is completely tired of institutional half-truths, empty dogmas that don't resonate with your sincere and authentic heart, simplistic answers that never truly satisfied your deepest existential and transformative questions about the true purpose of authentic, liberating, and transformative spiritual life that transcends human limitations. For years on end, you probably felt that something was terribly wrong with the traditional churches, established for centuries without question. That crucial fundamental pieces of the complete spiritual puzzle that should give meaning to your existence were missing. That the official teachings had huge, inexplicable gaps that no one could satisfactorily explain with convincing, coherent logic. That there was a gigantic, abysmal difference between the authentic, original revolutionary message of Jesus and what is routinely preached from Sunday pulpits controlled by religious authorities who maintain the established status quo without allowing for deeper questioning. You probably went to Mass for years and felt an inexplicable emptiness. You read the Bible looking for answers and found more questions. You prayed for clarity and received more confusion. You looked to religious leaders for authentic wisdom and found prefabricated answers that didn't truly touch your soul. You were told to have blind faith when your heart craved real understanding. You were asked for obedience when your spirit yearned for freedom. And deep down you always knew something wasn't complete, that you were missing crucial pieces of the puzzle, that there were deeper truths waiting to be discovered, that your connection to the divine should be more direct, more real, more transformative than what institutions allowed you to experience. If you feel this message is already resonating deeply with you from the most sincere heart, subscribe right now to this sacred channel dedicated entirely to unfiltered truth. Because this space is a spiritual refuge for sincere, authentic, fearless seekers of truth, for those who prefer an uncomfortable but authentic faith over a comfortable but completely empty, hollow religion, for those who are willing to question everything they've been taught, if it means finding the real truth without institutional filters that distort and manipulate the pure, original message. Here you won't find boring, repetitive sermons you've heard thousands of times in conventional, boring, predictable, and manipulative churches. Here you won't find the same predictable, domesticated institutional theology that keeps people spiritually asleep like religious zombies. Here you will find the forbidden secrets that completely changed and revolutionized my spiritual life, and that are about to revolutionize yours as well, irreversibly and permanently, for a lifetime with no possibility of returning to the previous state of ignorance. Because Mary Magdalene isn't just a dusty, ancient historical figure to be studied academically in boring traditional universities. She represents the authentic spiritual power that lives dormant within you, waiting to be consciously awakened in this present moment. She represents your natural, divine capacity to connect directly with the sacred without the need for controlling human intermediaries or institutions telling you exactly what to think or how to believe about the eternal, unchanging divine that lives within your heart. Your spirituality is completely yours. It is intimately personal. It is non-transferable and unique. It is sacred and divine. And Mary Magdalene is the golden master key to recovering that direct connection with the divine that should always have been your inalienable natural right as a conscious and spiritually awakened human being from birth until the physical death of your temporary material body. You are not here by blind chance. Your soul recognized something profound in this message from the very beginning. Because within you lives the same divine spark that Mary Magdalene fully awakened 2,000 years ago. The same capacity to connect directly with the sacred. The same power of spiritual transformation that institutions have tried to convince you you don't naturally possess and that you need to seek outside. But the truth is, everything you need is already inside you, waiting to be activated. For almost 2,000 full years, Mary Magdalene has been systematically and deliberately presented as the lost, sinful woman who humbly found redemption at the feet of Jesus, the merciful and compassionate Savior, the repentant prostitute who radically changed her life overnight, the grateful follower who quietly served in the background without taking center stage, the submissive, silent disciple who quietly learned in the background while men made all the important, momentous decisions of the early Christian movement without ever consulting her valuable opinion. But this image was extremely carefully, meticulously, and deliberately constructed by powerful men who had absolutely everything to lose if the complete, real truth were to be fully revealed to the world public without any censorship or manipulation. Why exactly was she systematically presented as a sexual sinner for centuries, when in reality she was Jesus' closest, most beloved, most important, and most influential disciple in profound spiritual, mystical, and transformative terms? Why do the approved official canonical Gospels barely mention her transcendental revolutionary importance when censored, prohibited texts clearly reveal her as the most powerful, visionary, transformative, and influential spiritual leader of authentic early Christianity, without subsequent institutional manipulations that distorted the original message? Why was her prophetic voice completely silenced when her mystical teachings could have radically transformed the spiritual world as we currently know it in the 21st century? The answer will surprise you and shock you as much as it completely surprised me when I began this exhaustive investigation, which lasted years of dedicated study without rest or distractions. Because Mary Magdalene was not merely a passive witness to Jesus' miraculous physical resurrection, as we have been told for generations. She was the exclusive bearer of secret mystical teachings, with whom Jesus shared profound revelations that no other male disciple ever received in their entirety during the entire time they were together as a spiritual community. The forbidden texts that the Church systematically burned for centuries reveal that Mary Magdalene had a completely special, unique relationship with Jesus that transcended the traditional conventions established by society. Not just romantic, though probably also, but fundamentally spiritual, mystical, and profoundly transformative, going beyond any normal, conventional human relationship. She understood the enlightened Master's deepest teachings in a way that the other disciples simply could not intellectually grasp, their minds limited by restrictive traditional concepts. But here's what's really going to shock you. In the Gnostic Gospels that miraculously survived systematic destruction, Mary is constantly shown debating complex spiritual issues with Peter, not as a student asking questions, but as a teacher instructing. The texts show that she had direct visions of the resurrected Christ that no other disciple experienced, that she received personal revelations about the nature of spiritual reality, that she understood the mysteries of the inner kingdom in a deep and intuitive way. Do you know why Peter felt such constant, evident jealousy of Mary Magdalene throughout his public ministry? Why the forbidden Gospels consistently depict intense conflicts between Peter and Mary over leadership of their group of followers? Because Peter represented the future of patriarchal, hierarchical institutional Christianity controlled exclusively by men with temporal, earthly power, while Mary represented the direct, free, egalitarian, mystical Christianity accessible to anyone, regardless of gender, social standing, formal education, or any other traditional limitations established by patriarchal society. This wasn't a simple personal dispute between two disciples jealous of the preferential attention of their beloved master. It was the ultimate fundamental clash between two completely opposing visions of the future of Christianity: an inclusive, liberating, and transformative egalitarian mysticism. The other, an exclusive, patriarchal, institutional one that controlled and manipulated the obedient masses, who never questioned the established authorities. And unfortunately, we know exactly which of these two visions ended up dominating official history for millennia, right up to the present day. In truth, Mary Magdalene represented something that religious authorities simply could not tolerate: a woman who didn't need male permission to connect with the divine, a spiritual leader who derived her authority directly from her mystical experience, not from institutional ordinations. A teacher who taught that every person, man or woman, could directly access spiritual truth without human intermediaries. Imagine the panic this caused in a patriarchal society where women were considered second-class citizens, a woman spiritually leading men, a woman teaching profound mystical truths, a woman being recognized as the closest disciple of the Master. This was uncontrollably dangerous and revolutionary. That's why they had to completely transform their image, turn the leader into a follower, the teacher into a student, the apostle into a repentant sinner. It was the only way to neutralize their revolutionary influence and maintain patriarchal control over the new religion that was emerging. What follows will change the way you view the gospel, authentic spirituality, and your own inner divine power forever, with no possibility of return. Because we're going to explore exactly what secret teachings Mary Magdalene received directly from Jesus, and why these mystical revelations were so dangerous to the institutional power firmly established for centuries that they had to be completely destroyed and erased from the collective memory. Get ready to discover the truth that changed my entire understanding of Christianity and is about to revolutionize your spiritual life irreversibly and permanently. It all began systematically and meticulously in the 4th century AD, when the Roman Emperor Constantine strategically convened the famous Council of Nicaea in the year 325 AD. There, exactly 300 men of political, religious, and economic power met to authoritatively decide which texts would be officially considered sacred canonical texts, and which would be declared dangerously heretical and condemned to total, irreversible destruction forever without the possibility of recovery. Here's the fundamental truth that was never clearly told to you in any established church over all these centuries. It wasn't God Almighty who personally decided which specific books would form the official canonical Bible we know and study today. It was ambitious politicians and religious leaders with very clear economic, material, and controlling interests, calculated and strategic in their efforts to maintain their absolute power over the ignorant, obedient masses. Dozens and dozens of Gospels were systematically rejected, banned, censored, and condemned as dangerous heresy that needed to be completely wiped from the face of the earth. The Gospel of Mary Magdalene, the Gospel of Philip, the secret Gospel of Thomas, the Gospel of Truth, and the Gospel of Judas. All these mystical texts contained revolutionary teachings that depicted a completely different Mary Magdalene than the submissive, domesticated image we officially know today. These sacred documents clearly and unequivocally presented her as Jesus' absolute favorite disciple, the exclusive recipient of special mystical revelations, and the undisputed natural leader of the apostles after the crucifixion and glorious resurrection of the enlightened Master. But this was too dangerous and threatening for an institutional church that was systematically building its absolute power on rigid, unchallenged, and immutable patriarchal structures for centuries. A powerful female spiritual leader was a direct mortal threat to the religious and economic social order they wanted to permanently establish without any opposition or deep questioning. That's why they developed a meticulous, systematic campaign of total destruction and elimination. They physically destroyed these sacred texts through ceremonial public burnings, brutally persecuted those who kept them secret in their homes, tortured to death the Gnostic teachers who taught these revolutionary truths, and deliberately constructed a completely different official narrative that was controllable and manipulable for the ignorant masses who followed without question. In 367, Bishop Athanasius of Alexandria issued an official letter definitively establishing the only 27 books that could be considered sacred canonical books in the official New Testament recognized by the Church. Any other text was officially declared a heresy, punishable by immediate excommunication, total confiscation of property, permanent exile, or outright death without appeal or mercy. The monks of the monastery of St. Pachomius in Nag Hammadi, Egypt, knowing full well that they possessed texts condemned by the authorities, carefully buried them in ceramic jars in the arid desert, awaiting better times that never came during their earthly lives. These texts remained hidden, buried, for nearly 1,600 full years, until their miraculous accidental discovery in the 20th century by peasants searching for natural fertilizer. But the master plan of silencing was far more sophisticated and calculated than simply burning forbidden holy books. They systematically transformed the public image of Mary Magdalene in the collective consciousness of millions of believers. In 591, Pope Gregory the Great delivered an influential sermon that officially and arbitrarily identified Mary Magdalene with the unnamed sinful woman who anointed Jesus' feet in the Gospel of Luke. This identification was completely arbitrary, lacking any solid biblical textual basis, but it perfectly served its political purpose, transforming the spiritual leader into a grateful, submissive, repentant sinner. For the next 1,000 years, this false image became entrenched in religious art. Paintings, sculptures, stained glass windows, and plays consistently presented Mary Magdalene as the repentant prostitute, the fallen woman who found redemption, the sinner who washed the Master's feet with her tears. Generation after generation of Christians grew up with this distorted image etched in their minds. Meanwhile, the texts that revealed his true role as a spiritual leader were systematically disappearing. Entire libraries were burned. Masters who taught Gnostic truths were executed. Communities that preserved these traditions were dispersed or completely destroyed. The Church developed an entire theology to justify excluding women from spiritual leadership. They quoted biblical texts taken out of context. They created doctrines about female spiritual inferiority. They established rules prohibiting women from teaching, preaching, or leading religious communities. All this because they knew perfectly well that if the truth about Mary Magdalene were to come to light, Christianity would be completely different. Women would reclaim their natural place as spiritual leaders. Religious authority would be based on personal mystical experience, not on institutional ordinations. Spirituality would become more democratic, egalitarian, and less controllable. Write in the comments below if you too feel that too many fundamental truths about our authentic spirituality have been deliberately hidden from us. What's coming next is even more shocking, revealing the systematic historical conspiracy that changed the course of spiritual history forever. In 1896, in a small, dusty antiques market in Cairo, Egypt, a German archaeologist named Karl Reinhardt casually purchased for very little money an ancient papyrus codex that would forever change the official history of institutionally established Christianity for millennia. It was none other than the Gospel of Mary Magdalene, the forbidden sacred text that the institutional church had desperately tried to completely erase from existence for over 1,500 consecutive years, relentlessly using every method available, including systematic violence. When it was finally fully translated decades later by courageous scholars, the revelations were absolutely devastating and catastrophic for the official religious narrative established for centuries. This gospel unequivocally presents Mary Magdalene not as a submissive, obedient follower, but as the favored, primary disciple to whom Jesus personally entrusted his deepest, secret, and revolutionary teachings about the true nature of the eternal, universal spiritual reality that transcends material limitations. Listen carefully to these exact words from the forbidden gospel that will change your perspective forever. The Savior solemnly said, "All natures, all formations, all creatures exist in and with one another and will ultimately resolve into their own original primordial roots. For the nature of matter resolves only into the roots of its own nature, without external interference." You understand the revolutionary and transformative depth of this mystical teaching, which transcends traditional dogmas. Jesus was revealing to Mary exclusively the deepest mysteries, the secrets of the cosmos, the true nature of material and spiritual reality, the secrets of the divine inner Christ who lives eternally within every human being, without exception, regardless of their established social, religious, or cultural background. But there is much more explosive, revelatory content in this forbidden text that will completely change your life. The Gospel also recounts in detail how Peter, completely filled with male jealousy, aggressively questioned Mary's natural leadership with these exact documented words. Did the Savior really speak secretly with a woman without us men fully knowing? We all need to humbly turn and listen to her obediently as if she were our teacher. He specifically preferred her to us men. And Levi, courageously defending Mary, responded directly to Peter with clear authority. "Peter, you have always been extremely impetuous, uncontrollable, and irascible. Now I see you exercising aggressive action against the woman, exactly as spiritual adversaries who oppose the truth do. But if the Savior made her completely trustworthy, who exactly are you to arrogantly reject her without valid reasons?" This historically documented conflict was not simply a personal one between two disciples jealous of the preferential attention of their beloved master. It was the ultimate fundamental clash between two completely opposing visions of the future of Christianity: an inclusive, liberating, and transformative egalitarian mysticism; the other, an exclusive, controlling, and systematically manipulative, patriarchal institutional one. The Gospel goes on to reveal that Mary received direct mystical visions of the glorified, risen Christ, which no other disciple ever experienced in their earthly lives. In these transcendental visions, Jesus explains to her in detail the 7 powers of anger that the soul must overcome and transform to achieve complete, definitive spiritual liberation: darkness, desire, ignorance, excitement of death, kingdom of the flesh, mad wisdom of the flesh, and destructive, irascible wisdom. These are profoundly Gnostic teachings about the true nature of the human soul, the detailed process of spiritual liberation, and the direct path to inner divinity without human intermediaries. They are revolutionary teachings that would turn anyone into their own spiritual master, completely eliminating the need for controlling institutional intermediaries who charge for their spiritual services. But here is the most shocking part of the Gospel that will truly change your understanding forever. Mary recounts that in her visions, the resurrected Christ revealed to her that salvation does not come from outside, but from awakening the divine spark that already exists within every human soul. That the kingdom of heaven is not a physical place, but a state of consciousness. That each person can directly experience their own divinity without the need for institutional intermediaries. Jesus explained to Mary that the material world is a temporary illusion, and that true reality is eternal spiritual reality. People suffer because they identify with their temporary bodies and emotions instead of recognizing their eternal divine nature. Liberation comes from understanding experientially that we are spiritual beings having a temporary human experience, not human beings seeking spiritual experiences. These revelations were absolutely revolutionary for their time and remain revolutionary today, because they mean you don't need priests to connect with God. You don't need elaborate rituals to experience the sacred. You don't need institutions to validate your spirituality. Everything you need is already within you, waiting to be consciously awakened. Mary also received teachings on the illusory nature of time and space, the reality of invisible spiritual dimensions, direct communication with beings of light, and specific meditation and contemplation techniques for accessing altered states of consciousness where these truths become experientially evident. Now you understand exactly why this gospel was such a dangerous threat to the establishment, why it had to be destroyed at any cost, regardless of the consequences for humanity. Because it revealed that true Christianity was a mystical religion of direct personal liberation, not an institution of mass control over dormant consciences. Mary Magdalene didn't just intellectually understand these mystical teachings in an academic way. She lived them, embodied them, and transmitted them with direct experiential authority. She was the true spiritual heir of Jesus' revolutionary message, which could have transformed the world. And that is precisely why she had to be silenced forever. The truth hurts deeply, but you need to hear it fully, without filters or institutional diplomatic softening that distorts historical reality. The institutional church felt such a primitive, ancestral fear of authentic feminine spiritual power that it dedicated centuries of enormous economic resources and systematic organized violence to completely erase it from the official history known to the masses. This was not a fortuitous coincidence at all. It was an extremely calculated, systematic, meticulous, and relentless campaign of total suppression without mercy or pity, because a powerful female spiritual leader represented absolutely everything they couldn't effectively control with their traditional patriarchal methods. Mary Magdalene didn't need male human intermediaries to connect directly with the eternal, unchanging divine. She didn't need priests officially ordained by authorities, temples built by men with material interests, or elaborate rituals controlled by religious authorities established for centuries. Her connection was completely direct, pure, personal, authentic, and revolutionary, without external manipulation of any kind. And that was terribly dangerous and threatening to an institution that was meticulously building its absolute power, precisely on being the exclusive, indispensable, and unquestionable obligatory intermediary between Almighty God and all believers in the entire world, without exception. True, authentic faith does not require lavish temples built by ambitious men with material economic interests. True, genuine faith does not require complicated rituals specifically designed to impress, intimidate, and control the minds of simple people. True faith requires only the truth, the absolute authenticity, the real, direct, and personal connection with the sacred that lives within every human soul from birth until the physical death of the temporary, material body. But they deliberately and consciously preferred to give you a completely domesticated, predictable, controllable religion that would keep you permanently dependent on their official interpretations, their exclusive, patented rituals, their unquestioned authority, and their rigid doctrines imposed without permitted debate or deep questioning. That's why they systematically transformed the natural leader into a submissive follower, the enlightened teacher into a silent student, the powerful apostle into a grateful, repentant, and eternally dependent sinner. Because a truly powerful, spiritually independent Mary Magdalene would have automatically inspired millions upon millions of conscious women and men to courageously seek their own direct connection to the divine without controlling intermediaries. And that would have definitively ended their spiritual monopoly forever, eliminating their source of economic and social power. You know exactly what Mary Magdalene represented to the institutional power firmly established for centuries. She represented living proof that anyone, regardless of gender, social position, formal education, or any other artificial limitations, could become a direct channel of authentic divine wisdom. She represented living, practical demonstration that authentic spirituality requires no external validation or official authorization from any kind of human institution. She perfectly embodied a completely free, personal, direct, mystical Christianity without controlling human intermediaries. A Christianity where each individual could be their own authorized priest, their own direct divine channel, their own completely independent spiritual teacher, authorized only by their own personal direct experience with the eternal, immutable sacred. Imagine the complete institutional panic this generated among the authorities. If people discovered they could connect directly with God without intermediaries, why would they need officially ordained priests? If they could receive authentic personal revelations, why would they need official dogmas established by authorities? If they could experience the sacred internally, why would they need external temples built by men with economic interests? Mary Magdalene represented the death of dependent institutional Christianity and the birth of a personal, liberating, transformative, mystical Christianity. Therefore, she had to be symbolically destroyed, completely transformed into the opposite of what she truly was, from a powerful leader to a submissive follower, from an enlightened teacher to a silent student, from an independent apostle to a dependent sinner. But the fear ran deeper than simply losing religious control. Mary Magdalene represented feminine power in its purest and most threatening form. A woman who derived her authority from no man. A woman who spoke directly to the divine. A woman who taught profound spiritual truths. A woman who led both men and women without asking permission from patriarchal authorities. In a society where women were considered the property of their fathers or husbands, this was revolutionary and incendiary. A spiritually independent woman was a dangerous example for all other women. If Mary Magdalene could be a spiritual leader, any woman could claim that natural right. That's why it wasn't enough to simply silence her. They had to completely destroy her image as a leader and replace it with something that reinforced traditional patriarchal roles. The repentant sinner was perfect because it showed a woman who had failed, needed male salvation, and finally found her proper place by humbly serving. This image transformation was so successful that for 1500 years, almost no one questioned the official version. Entire generations of women grew up believing that their role in spirituality was secondary and subordinate, that they needed male authorization to access the divine, that their feminine nature was inherently spiritually inferior. Meanwhile, Mary Magdalene's true message that every person, man or woman, has direct access to the divine was buried so deeply that it seemed lost forever. But the truth has a way of resurfacing when humanity is ready to receive it, and that time is now. In this era of global spiritual awakening, the lies of the past can no longer hold. The truth about Mary Magdalene is finally emerging after centuries of enforced silence. Here is the official historical title that will completely change your spiritual perspective forever and ever, with no possibility of return. Apostola Apostolorum, the Apostle of the Apostles, the leader of spiritual leaders. This is not a title I creatively invented for this shocking revelatory video. It is the documented official historical title given specifically to Mary Magdalene by early authentic Christians during the first centuries of true early Christianity, without subsequent institutional manipulations that distorted the original life-changing message. She was the one who officially announced the resurrection to all the other male disciples of the select group. She was the first person to directly see Jesus bodily resurrected after the painful and traumatic crucifixion. She was the one who personally received the sacred mission of bringing the life-changing good news to the entire world without exception. She was the officially authorized messenger of the most important, momentous event in the entire history of eternal universal Christianity. Mary was not a passive, submissive follower. She was an active, decisive leader of the spiritual movement. She was not a silent student. She was an authorized teacher, personally recognized by Jesus himself. She was not a silenced voice. She was an official messenger of the risen Christ with unquestionable direct divine authority. The official canonical Gospels, even after systematic censorship and manipulative biased editing, could not completely erase this fundamental historical truth documented in multiple independent sources. Mark, Matthew, Luke, and John all unequivocally acknowledge that Mary Magdalene was the first official witness to the bodily resurrection of the glorified Jesus Christ. But the censored, forbidden texts go far beyond this basic, superficial acknowledgement. They clearly show that Jesus entrusted her with exclusive, secret, special teachings that he never shared with any other male disciple of the select group. He specifically revealed to him the profound mysteries of the inner kingdom, the practical secrets of personal spiritual transformation, the revolutionary truth about the divine nature that eternally dwells within every conscious and spiritually awakened human being, from the moment of birth until the physical death of the temporary material body. Do you know why Mary was historically called the one who knew all knowledge, complete, absolute knowledge without limitations? Because she had received complete gnosis, absolute knowledge about the true, real nature of the eternal, universal spiritual reality that transcends material limitations. Not theoretical, academic, intellectual knowledge, but direct experiential wisdom, personal, mystical revelation lived daily, 24 hours a day. In the forbidden Gnostic texts, Mary consistently appears as the official authorized interpreter of the most profound and complex teachings of Jesus, the enlightened master. When the other male disciples failed to understand the complex parables, it was Mary who explained them clearly with unquestionable divine authority. When they had doubts about the profound meaning of the mystical revelations, it was Mary who gave them the definitive, correct interpretation without any possible error. She had fully developed what the Gnostics called direct spiritual vision, the supernatural ability to directly perceive mystical realities invisible to the ordinary, limited material eye. This is why she could see the resurrected Christ when the other disciples could not see him bodily with their physical eyes. This is why she could understand teachings that remained completely mysterious and incomprehensible to others, limited by traditional concepts. Mary Magdalene perfectly represented the ideal of authentic Gnostic Christianity, the person who had fully awakened her divine inner Christ, who had fully realized her infinite spiritual potential, who had become a perfect, pure channel of direct heavenly wisdom without limiting human filters. Their sacred mission was not only to announce the temporary physical resurrection of Jesus to the ignorant world. Their mission was to demonstrate in practice that permanent spiritual resurrection, the awakening of the inner Christ, was truly possible for any human being sincerely dedicated to authentic spiritual transformation, without exceptions or artificial limitations. But here's what really makes her mission special. Mary was not only given the authority to teach other male disciples, but also the responsibility of preserving and transmitting Jesus' most secret teachings. She was the guardian of the deepest mysteries of early Christianity. The texts reveal that Jesus entrusted him with knowledge about the multidimensional nature of reality. He taught him specific meditation techniques for accessing altered states of consciousness. He taught him direct communication with angelic beings. He taught him methods of spiritual healing and energetic transformation. Maria also received instructions on how to guide others through the process of spiritual awakening, how to recognize the stages of mystical development, how to overcome obstacles that arise on the path to enlightenment, how to integrate spiritual experiences into practical daily life. That's why it was so tremendously dangerous to the established institutional power, because it proved through experience that divinity was not the exclusive privilege of Jesus, but the universal potential of all conscious, spiritually awakened humanity without artificial limitations imposed by external authorities. And now I want to share something very important with you personally at this very moment. I want you to completely pause the video for a specific moment and write down in the comments below from what exact part of the world you're watching this transformative, revelatory video right now. Write it down right now because I need you to know one absolutely fundamental thing. You are not at all alone in this massive global spiritual awakening that is occurring simultaneously across the planet. As you type your current geographic location, thousands upon thousands of people from every continent on the planet are spiritually awakening with you at this exact moment, perfectly synchronized by higher forces. From America to Europe, from Asia to Africa, from Oceania to the most remote islands in the world, there is a massive global spiritual awakening taking place right now as you listen to these revelatory words resonating in your soul. And you are a fundamental and integral part of this global movement of spiritual consciousness that is transforming the entire planet. You didn't arrive here by mere cosmic coincidence or mundane chance. Your soul brought you specifically to this video because it is fully prepared to receive truths that have been systematically hidden for far too long in history by controlling institutions. Every comment I read daily resoundingly confirms to me that we are living in a unique and special moment in human history. A moment where age-old lies can no longer be artificially sustained, and where authentic spiritual truth demands to be fully liberated without institutional censorship or political manipulation. You know what moves me most deeply? When I read all the daily comments from this growing community. Seeing how people from completely different cultures, from completely different countries, and from diverse religious backgrounds are experiencing exactly the same spiritual awakening. The same doubts about institutional religion, the same profound questions about the true nature of authentic spirituality, the same unquenchable thirst for real, unadulterated spiritual authenticity. This is not a fortuitous coincidence, it is perfect divine synchronicity orchestrated by higher forces. It is the collective awakening of humanity, finally recognizing its true divine spiritual nature, which it has always had since the beginning of time. Mary Magdalene isn't just a dusty, ancient historical figure to be studied academically in boring, traditional universities. She is the universal symbol of feminine spiritual power that is awakening globally in this unique historical moment. She represents mystical wisdom that transcends gender, culture, and institutional religions established for centuries. When you enter your location, remember that you are connecting with a global community of sincere, authentic seekers of liberating spiritual truth. Together, we are creating a new form of spirituality based on direct personal experience, not on external dogmas imposed by controlling authorities. Every person who encounters this video is being called by their soul to awaken. It's no coincidence that you're here now. Your spirit recognized something in this message that resonates with your deepest inner truth. Mary Magdalene is calling for a new generation of spiritual seekers, people who are no longer satisfied with superficial answers. They want to experience the divine directly. They are willing to question everything they've been taught if it means finding their authentic truth. Here is the most revolutionary and transformative teaching that Mary Magdalene received directly from Jesus, and which the institutional church has desperately tried to hide for centuries. The kingdom of heaven is not located somewhere in the distant, inaccessible physical sky. It is completely within you, waiting to be consciously awakened in this present moment as you listen to these revelatory words. Jesus did not come to earth to found an institutional religion with ritual temples and manipulative, controlling human hierarchies. He came specifically to awaken the divinity that already exists naturally in every conscious human being from birth. This is the fundamental truth that Mary deeply understood experientially, and that is why she became the closest, beloved disciple of the enlightened master, without competition. All this time, religious institutions have systematically told you to seek God outside of yourself, in temples built by men, in rituals designed by authorities, in intermediaries who proclaim themselves official representatives of the divine, in institutions that demand blind obedience to their specific doctrines without question. But the kingdom of heaven has always been within you from the moment of your physical birth. Your natural connection to the divine requires no institutional permissions, no external validation of any kind, no one to tell you whether you are spiritually worthy or not, because divine dignity is your inalienable natural inheritance as a conscious, spiritually awakened human being. Mary Magdalene understood this profoundly through her daily experience. That's why her faith was so authentically powerful, so revolutionary, so directly, and so dangerously independent for those who sought to monopolize the spirituality of the ignorant masses who never questioned the established authorities. She knew from direct personal experience that every person has immediate and unlimited access to spiritual truth without the need for human intermediaries, without the need for external official authorization, without the need to belong to specific religious institutions organized hierarchically with economic interests. And that deep mystical understanding automatically made her the most dangerous revolutionary spiritual leader of her specific historical time. In the forbidden Gnostic Gospels, Mary clearly explains that Jesus revealed to her that the human soul is fundamentally identical to the eternal, immutable, universal divine essence. Not similar or unrelated, but completely identical in essence without differences. You are the light of the world, Jesus told her according to these forbidden texts. The kingdom is within you and without you. When you know yourself, then you will be fully known by the divine. This is pure gnosis, direct experiential knowledge of your true, eternal, inner divine nature. Not blind faith in external doctrines, but experiential recognition of your own natural inner divinity, always present and waiting to be consciously awakened. You understand why this was so dangerous, threatening the institutional power firmly established for centuries. If each person can directly experience their own divinity, why do they need priests officially ordained by authorities? If they can receive authentic personal revelations, why do they need official dogmas established by institutions? If they can connect internally with the sacred, why do they need external temples built by men with material economic interests? Mary Magdalene represented the death of institutionally dependent Christianity and the birth of a completely liberating, free, autonomous Christianity. A Christianity where each person is their own sacred temple, their own authorized priest, their own direct channel of divine wisdom, without controlling intermediaries charging for their spiritual services. This wasn't an abstract intellectual theory for Mary Magdalene. It was a lived reality, personally experienced daily, 24 hours a day. She had fully awakened her inner Christ and lived permanently from that awakened divine consciousness without interruptions or doubts. But here's what truly revolutionizes your entire spiritual understanding. Mary taught that the awakening of the inner Christ is not a one-time event, but an ongoing process of transformation. Each person can gradually develop their ability to directly perceive invisible spiritual realities. According to its secret teachings, The inner realm has multiple levels or dimensions of experience, beginning with occasional moments of deep peace and divine connection to permanent states of enlightened consciousness, where the separation between the personal self and the universal divine completely disappears. Mary also taught specific techniques to accelerate this awakening process, methods of meditation, contemplation, and prayer that open direct channels of communication with the divine. Practices of forgiveness and unconditional love that dissolve emotional blocks that prevent us from directly experiencing our divine nature. All of this was available to anyone sincerely dedicated to spiritual growth. It required no special ordinations or membership in particular institutions. It only required sincerity, humility, and dedication to the process of inner transformation. Now you're probably rightly wondering why they systematically concealed all of this for so many consecutive centuries without interruption. What exactly did they have to lose if the full truth about Mary Magdalene were finally revealed to the world without any censorship? The answer is simple but profoundly revealing: absolute power and total control over the obedient, believing masses who followed the established authorities without ever questioning them. A truly free faith is a faith completely uncontrolled by external human authorities with material interests. A believer who experientially knows that he or she has unlimited, direct access to the divine needs no human intermediaries for anything spiritual. He or she does not need to pay obligatory tithes to access Almighty God. He or she does not need to confess to priests to obtain divine forgiveness. He or she does not need elaborate, costly rituals to feel genuinely spiritually connected to the eternal sacred. The full truth about Mary Magdalene would reveal that original Christianity was far more mystical, more personal, more liberating, and more revolutionary than what religious institutions have officially taught for millennia, without interruption to maintain their control. It was a spirituality of the direct, personal inner Christ, not of the institutional Christ controlled by human authorities. It was a religion of direct, personal experience, not of blind obedience to rigid external doctrines imposed without any permitted debate or deep questioning, and that would have completely destroyed the lucrative business model of institutional organized religion forever. That's why they deliberately chose to create a repentant, submissive Mary Magdalene, instead of showing the revolutionary spiritual leader she truly was, both historically and spiritually. Because a powerful Mary Magdalene would have demonstrated that any woman can be an authentic spiritual leader without the need for official male ordination. She would have proven that religious authority comes not from official ordinations, but from authentic, personal spiritual awakening. She would have revealed that connection with the divine is the inalienable natural right of every soul, not the exclusive privilege of human institutions organized for economic interests. Mary Magdalene's Christianity was dangerously egalitarian, mystically direct, spiritually free, and completely liberating, exactly the opposite of what the institutions of power wanted to maintain their absolute control over the faith of millions of people for centuries on end. A free faith is a completely uncontrollable faith, and an uncontrollable faith means the death of institutional religious power forever. Imagine for a moment what the world would be like if Mary Magdalene's teachings had been preserved. If women had maintained their natural place as spiritual leaders, if spirituality had evolved as a direct personal experience rather than a system of institutional control, we wouldn't have had centuries of religious wars. We wouldn't have seen the systematic persecution of mystics and healers. We wouldn't have experienced the artificial separation between the sacred and the everyday. Humanity would have evolved spiritually in a completely different way, but the controllers knew full well that a free spirituality would mean the end of their power. That's why they invested so much effort in creating an alternative narrative that would keep people dependent on external institutions for their spiritual salvation. If you got here, it wasn't a cosmic, temporary, or fortuitous coincidence. It was a profound calling that your soul recognized from the first moment of this transformative, revelatory video. The truth is, seeking you as much as you desperately seek it in your spiritual life. What you've heard today is only the beginning of an awakening that will transform your spiritual life forever, with no possibility of returning to the previous state. Mary Magdalene is not simply a dusty, ancient historical figure to be studied academically in boring traditional universities. She represents the authentic spiritual power that lies dormant within you, waiting to be consciously awakened in this present moment. She represents your natural divine capacity to connect directly with the sacred without institutional intermediaries or authorities telling you exactly what to think or how to spiritually believe about the divine. Your spirituality is completely yours. It is intimately personal. It is non-transferable and unique. It is sacred and divine. And now that you know the truth about who Mary Magdalene really was, you have the spiritual responsibility to awaken your own divine inner Christ, not to blindly follow another external teacher, but to become the master of your own authentic, liberating spiritual life, because that is the true teaching that she would have wanted to share with you personally. You too are a divine channel. You too have direct access to the truth. You too can be an apostle of your own spiritual transformation without the need for controlling intermediaries who charge for spiritual services. You don't need anyone's permission to begin this sacred path of spiritual awakening. You don't need external validation to explore your own natural inner divinity. You don't need to belong to any institution to be authentically spiritual, connected to the eternal, unchanging divine within your heart. Mary Magdalene is calling you to fully awaken in this present moment. She is inviting you to reclaim the natural spiritual power you have always possessed since birth. She is showing you that the kingdom of heaven is not in some distant, inaccessible heaven, but within your own awakened consciousness, present here and now. You are ready to respond to this divine call that resonates in your deepest heart. You are ready to become your own spiritual teacher, empowered by your direct experience. You have the courage to seek the truth directly without human intermediaries to control and manipulate you. The path begins right now in this exact present moment. The transformation begins right now as you listen to these revelatory words. Your awakening is already happening as you listen to these words that resonate in the depths of your being. It doesn't matter how many years you've believed in official institutional versions. It doesn't matter how long you've depended on controlling religious institutions. What matters is that you are here now, ready to receive the truth that will completely change your life forever. Mary Magdalene waited 1,700 years for this unique historical moment to arrive. The moment when her true story could be told without institutional censorship. The moment when her message of spiritual liberation could reach you directly, without intermediaries. Your soul called to her, and she responded through this revealing video. Now, it's your turn to respond to the call of your own inner divinity, waiting to be consciously awakened. This is just the beginning of your journey toward authentic spiritual freedom. Mary Magdalene has shown you that it is possible. Now it's up to you to take the next step in your own personal spiritual transformation. If this video awakened something profoundly transformative in you, if you feel you need more truths like this in your authentic spiritual life, click subscribe now without hesitation. Because what you just heard is only the tip of the iceberg of revelations waiting for you on this channel, dedicated entirely to spiritual truth without institutional filters. There are many more forbidden truths waiting for you, many more secrets that official history has sought to bury forever. The conspiracy to silence true spirituality goes much deeper than you imagine possible. There are secret texts, occult teachings, and mystical revelations that will completely change your understanding of Christianity, spirituality, and your own divine potential. Don't miss the next video about to appear on your screen, where I'll reveal another explosive truth that the Church has desperately sought to hide for centuries. We're going to explore the forbidden texts that reveal secret teachings of Jesus that they never dared to include in the official canonical Bible, because they were too revolutionary for institutional control. Your spiritual awakening is just beginning right now. The truth that changed my life is waiting to completely change yours too. Subscribe now and join this global community of sincere seekers of liberating spiritual truth, because together we are awakening to a new era of authentic spirituality, free from manipulative institutional control. The next video awaits you with more shocking revelations. Your transformation continues to advance. Your true spiritual power is about to be fully revealed, unfiltered, and unmanipulated. Mary Magdalene is calling you from the depths of your heart. The truth is patiently waiting for you. Your soul already knows the path you must follow toward authentic spiritual freedom. Click subscribe and continue this journey of spiritual awakening that you have just begun in this present moment. Because this is only the beginning of your transformation toward the complete spiritual freedom that was always your natural right as an incarnated divine being. The truth about Mary Magdalene has opened a door in your consciousness that can never be closed. Now it is your responsibility to walk through that door toward your own authentic spiritual enlightenment. Thank you for watching this video until the end. We will see you in the next video.